Thank you, Ella. Ooh, round of applause. Another round of applause for Ella. So parents, I apologize, but give me a moment. I'm going to actually talk to your kids for just a second, and then I'll loop you back in, if that's okay. Kids in the room, how many of you like math? Hands up. Hands up. Okay, good. Hands down. And how many of you like math homework? Hands up. Come on, there's got to be somebody in here who likes math homework. Do I have one? Do I have one?
Yeah, one.
Where? Okay, wow. Okay. What are you doing? You haven't been around long enough. Okay. You like math homework? What's your name? What's your name? Menashe. What grade are you in?
First.
Why do you still like math homework? Okay, I have a question for you. Imagine the following. Tomorrow, you're in school, and your teacher gives you a lot of math homework. A lot. All right? Can you imagine that? All right, good. And you come home tomorrow, and you do whatever you do after school. And you play, and you relax, and then you have dinner. And then you sit down, and it's time to do math homework. Still with me? How much math work do you have?
I don't know.
A lot. You're with me. Okay, a lot of homework. Okay? A lot of homework. And you sit down, and you've got the math problems in front of you, and you're about to start, and you see not only the math problems, but you have all the answers too. All the answers. How do you feel?
Good.
Yeah, probably pretty good. Right? I would imagine that's true for most of us. Most of us, even if we like math and we like math homework, if we had a ton of it one night and we come home and we find it was all done for us, we're still feeling probably pretty good. Right? So here's the thing that's just happened to me. Really, it just happened to me. Now, I don't like math homework. Never did. Didn't really like math much either. But I love public speaking. Some people like math. Some people like public speaking. In my experience, many more people like math. So last week, I knew that I had to prepare something for this morning. I knew that was my homework. I needed to prepare a speech, something to say. And so I'm sitting down last week, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to say this morning, and I realized that all my homework had been done for me. It was done. Because I realized that over the past couple of months, and last couple of weeks in particular, there were 3 speeches, or more particularly 2 speeches and an interview, that said absolutely everything that I wanted to say this morning. So all I'm going to do with you this morning is share with you what others have said already. All right, parents, I'm listening again. The first speech happened back in May of this year, just a couple of months ago. That's Dan Sinor. Dan Sinor rocketed into fame when he published his book, Startup Nation. Today, he has a podcast, Call Me Back, probably the largest English language podcast dealing with Israeli news. And so he was invited in May to give the State of World Jewry address at the 92nd Street Y in New York City, asked to comment on where the Jewish people were, what was happening with the Jewish people 2 years into this awful Gaza war. And so Dan Sinor stands up there at the 92nd Street Y and begins his address by saying that as bad as things are, he's going to offer some Jewish optimism. Everybody know what Jewish optimism is? It could be worse. And so he starts describing where we are and what's going on, and obviously he talks about the rise in anti-Semitism here in the United States and all over the world. And he notes that the truth of the matter is, there's very little we can do. There's very little we can do to weaken the anti-Semites, to make them change their minds, but what we can do in the face of a rise of anti-Semitism is we can strengthen ourselves. And how do we strengthen ourselves as Jews? Well, he said there's one choice we can make. We can choose to live more Jewish lives. We can choose to live more Jewish lives. Because if we want to be strong as Jews, we need to know who we are as Jews. We need to know where we came from, where we're headed, where we're going. That's what it means to be strong. And then he recounted data that's been around for several decades already. which says that if you want your children to live Jewish lives, if you want your children to be engaged in the Jewish community as adults, if you want them to be advocates and supporters of the state of Israel, well then, summer camp, Jewish summer camp, that's good. And youth groups, that's nice. But nothing compares to the impact of Jewish day school. And not only that, but the data is clear, the longer your child is in a Jewish day school, the more apt they are to live Jewish lives, to feel connected to the state of Israel and the people of Israel into adulthood. But he didn't stop there. He noted that after COVID, unfortunately, a number of Jewish day schools across the country were forced to close. But he said in the past 2 years, there's been a renaissance of Jewish day schools, new schools that have opened that are blazing new paths in the world of Jewish day school, particularly with regard to accessibility. And by accessibility, I think and I hope he meant opening the doors of Jewish day schools to families who didn't necessarily see themselves as day school families beforehand. Opening the doors of Jewish day schools to families who religiously didn't necessarily feel comfortable in a Jewish day school. Opening the doors of day schools to families who financially didn't think Jewish day school was feasible. And he mentioned 3 different schools. He mentioned Tamim Academies, a series of micro-elementary schools opening in various communities across the country. He mentioned Yavna Academy in Paramus. And then he mentioned the Jewish Leadership Academy here in Miami, Florida. Or in other words, Dan Sinor, speaking to hundreds of thousands of Jews across the world, said that if you want to know what you can do to counter the world we live in, if it bothers you what's happening around you, you want to actually feel like you're doing something, the best thing you can do is exactly what all of you are doing here this morning. So welcome to JLA. The second speaker was an interview, which I'm sure many of you heard, interview on 60 Minutes with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner after the ceasefire. And towards the end of the interview, Leslie Stahl turns to Jared Kushner and begins to push him in the following way. He says, Jared, you can't argue with the fact that Israel's reputation has taken quite a beating in the past 2 years. All sorts of claims, and we know what they are, leveled at Israel. She said, what can Israel do now, after the ceasefire, to rehabilitate its reputation, to fix the way the world sees it? And without batting an eyelash, Jared responded, just be exceptional. All Israel needs to do is to continue to be exceptional. In innovation, in academia, in empathy, in technology, just continue to be exceptional. And the rest of the world will notice. And we think the same thing here. Because you know what? We live in a world and in a society where good simply isn't good enough. We live in a world where great is just the start. If we want our kids to thrive in the world they're headed to, they need to be exceptional. They need to stand up and stand out. And if we want our children to be exceptional, we need to build exceptional schools for them. We need to give them exceptional faculty recruited from across the world. We need to give them curriculum that isn't the same as what they would get at a standard secular independent school, public school, or even in a Jewish day school. It needs to be exceptional. We need to think of programs that aren't the same as what's been done before. It needs to be exceptional. And if we want our children to be exceptional, most of all, we need to surround them by other young people who also aspire to be exceptional. And that is what we're trying to do here at JLA. The third speech I was privileged to hear live. As I sat just 2 weeks ago, surrounded by 28 of our upper school students at J&F's Global Conference on Israel. And we were sitting there in the back of the plenary when Bob Lemke got up to speak. Now, I imagine Bob Lemke is not necessarily a name that's familiar to many of you. It certainly was not familiar to me. Bob Lemke, I later learned, is quite well known in business and philanthropic circles in the state of Colorado, where he's from. But the primary reason I didn't know who he was, and probably you don't know who he is because Bob Lemke is Catholic. And he let the crowd know that he's probably the first non-Jew to chair a major JNF, Jewish National Fund, event. And so we gave him the round of applause that he deserves, and he began to describe why he was so enamored with the state of Israel, why he was such a staunch supporter of Israel as a non-Jew. And one phrase he used caught my ear. He said that from the very beginning, from years ago, when he first started learning about what the state of Israel is, he recognized that Israel is the seat of radical hope. He said that if a people such as ours could build a state such as ours out of the ashes of the Holocaust, then anything is possible. It is for him the seat of radical hope. And while the stones behind me are genuine Jerusalem stone, this is not Israel. But I do like to think that we're doing something on a much smaller scale that I hope is quite similar. I believe that what we're doing here is we're creating an engine of radical hope. Because when I see 7th grader Ella Cohen get over her fear of public speaking, and I see the 8th graders you're about to meet with the poise and passion that they have, I am filled with radical hope. When I walk our classrooms and our hallways and I see students who are involved in designing smart closets for the visually impaired, and devices that are going to help clean our oceans, and figuring out ways to combat hunger, and starting organizations that provide fitness for the disabled, I am filled with radical hope. When I see our students leading Harkness seminars, and I see our students not just entering but winning math and engineering competitions, I am filled with hope. And next week, as close to 300 of the cities and the counties' brightest young minds, 3rd through 8th grade, are going to come here to JLA for a math competition. Because there's no place else in South Florida that does anything quite like it. I am filled with hope that very soon the entire South Florida area will equate the highest standards of educational quality, the highest standards of education, with a Jewish education. And I am filled with radical hope, where just a few weeks later our gym is going to be filled with mothers and daughters, grandmothers and granddaughters, coming together to bake challah together, no matter what their background or religious affiliation, coming together to engage in our traditions, to sing together, to dance together, to be inspired together. I am filled with radical hope that, in fact, the things which have sustained us for centuries are going to continue to sustain us well into the future. That we as a community are indeed leaning into the idea of living more Jewish lives. And so I walk away from here each and every day filled with radical hope. And my hope for you today is that as you finish your day here, you're filled with the very same feeling. That there's something happening here at JLA that gives us hope for the future, hope that tomorrow will be better even than today, and that you will decide to come join us and be a part of it. Enjoy your day.